Hello, and welcome to chapter 19 of Rebel's Art Forms. We are going to talk about the Islamic world. And let's take a look at this first image here, which is basically an overview map of the countries involved when it comes to the Islamic art. Something about Islamic art, or even Islam in general, is that I can tell you that Islam is one of the fastest growing religions of today. There is many things about the Islamic religion that people are attracted to. I can tell you that one of the characteristics of Islam is that it has a tendency to fluctuate. It actually it changes and shifts through time. Unlike many religions where they're basically one particular way for years and decades and centuries, when it comes to Islam, it actually the the kings and these different rulers, they actually modify it through time. So something a little bit interesting about the Islamic religion. So you'll hear this word being used a lot when it comes to describing a follower of Islam. We call them a Muslim. A Muslim translates into one who submits to God. So this religion started with Muhammad. Muhammad is the Messiah of the Islamic religion. It's something about Muhammad. He's also mentioned in the Bible and so on. So something about Islam. It's actually connected to Judaism, which Christianity is actually connected to as well. So there's a lot of some interesting parallels, and there are just a few rules that really separate some of these world religions. So something about just the talk of religion in general. People, they often separate each other based off of things like religion. But when you're someone like me, where you actually studied a lot of different religions, you'll find out that there's actually more things that make us similar than things that make us separate. So when it comes to the religion of Islam or even any other kind of religion, the key about learning is really to be open-minded. And I actually learned a lot just from studying different religions. So anyhow, it started in 622 with Muhammad, with his immigration to Medina. Medina is one of the hotspots in terms of the followers of Islam. It's somewhat of a destination for those who are going through a type of pilgrimage. Something about Islam, it quickly spread through the Byzantine Empire, which is the early Christian empire. A lot of Islamic nations started to establish themselves in North Africa, also in Spain and other parts of Europe. So these are some artistic traditions when it comes to the Muslims. For one, is that it allowed for conquered peoples to retain religion and culture, which is a really interesting concept because if you think about Spain, I like to mention Spain because my parents are from the Philippines, and so we too are a type of colonized country. For a period of time, people in the Philippines were forced to speak Spanish, and so something about the Spanish, whenever they would come over and say that they were to occupy and basically take over a country, they had to switch to their way of life. They had to speak the language. They also had to follow their religion. But for the Islamic cultures, whenever they would go into a country, they didn't enforce that same idea. They didn't force people to switch to their religion, which is a really interesting concept. Usually when it comes to things like religion, it's so strict. They have to follow it. You have to follow the same thing. Otherwise, we are enemies and so on. But for Islamic religion, it's not exactly like that. And you can see from the behavior of the leaders, where they actually allow for those that they conquered are still allowed to practice their own religions. There is this adaptation for extant traditions. So they still try to keep the traditions going, but they're also welcoming new ones. Something about the artistic traditions of the Islamic people, they frown upon representation of the human figures used in a religious context. In other words, you will not see figurative work in arts, especially when it comes to the representation of Muhammad. And so why would you think it is not favorable to portray these figures? You can probably say that there's a chance they can be portrayed wrongly. Say that they make him look different. They render him inaccurately so that people will have a misguided perception of how he appeared. And so they do not favor the use of figures in their religious art. So the recreation of living things as competition with Allah, or God who created all. So just to have these human figures, in a way, it's almost competing with Allah. So Muhammad prohibited from imagery. So when it comes to these Islamic cultures in Arab lands, the early houses of worship are called mosques. So the mosque is equivalent to a church or a temple. They must be big enough to accommodate all male worshippers for Friday prayers. So they have their own distinctive rituals. So it seems as though for the Islamic religion, they have male worshippers that come on Fridays. So they have to have these minarets. Minarets are the towers that mark the building's location. So if you see a mosque, usually they have a type of roof where it looks like a very large circle, this dome-like structure. If you think about things like the Gothic architecture, the early Christian architecture, most of their churches had the pointed roofs. For mosques, they're almost always rounded. So those are some of the distinct characteristics that separate them from many of the other churches. Maybe if you've driven around Fresno, across the street from Fresno State, there's a mosque there actually. And so those towers are called minarets, and that's where these male worshippers go up there, and they go up there to pray and to chant and so on. And so there's a great mosque in Kairouan, Tunisia, and they have the mihrab that points to the Mecca. So the minarets are the towers. The mihrab is a niche within a doorway or a window that usually points in the direction of Mecca. So that is very important in their religion, that they face the Holy Land. And so here is an image of the Great Mosque. So when it comes to their architecture, I mentioned the minarets earlier. You can see the minarets on this image here, especially in the lower right-hand corner. It's very tall, but it's always on a tall part of the overall building, similar to the Christian church, where they usually have the altar under the highest point of the building. So again, when it comes to the mosques, the minarets are very distinctive of the Islamic culture. You always see the rounded rooftops. And so when it comes to these Islamic arts, ceramics play a big role in their way of creating works of art. They were very advanced when it came to working with metals. So they found ways to make it more lustrous. They made it shinier. They gave it a very translucent appeal. And so the Islamic people are the Islamic cultures from the past, they were very advanced at working with metals. So they gave it this glaze that imparts a metallic sheen. It's actually a very difficult method to create that effect on these metals. And so here is an example of some ceramic arts from the Islamic culture. So one of the characteristics of Islamic arts is the symmetry and also the organic patterns. So if we look at this work of art here, a lot of really interesting organic patterns. It appears to have a lot of calligraphy as well. I love that. I really enjoy some of that writing there on the top, and also within the crevice itself, a lot of calligraphy in the bottom as well. So for the Islamic culture, they use calligraphy a lot to tell the stories. They don't use figures to portray the story. Some like things like the Passion in Christianity, you won't see things like that. You'll see words for the most part. And something about this picture here, it has a very lustrous quality. It looks like it's shining. It looks like it's shimmering. That's something that the Islamic people were very good at. And so this was made during the early 13th century. And when it came to the Islamic culture, they actually came into Spain. And it's one of the first lands to be conquered by Muslims, which is a little bit of a surprise, knowing that the Spanish country is one of the largest Christian countries. It was also conquered by the Muslim people for a period of time. So even though they were conquered by the Muslim people, they weren't forced to switch their religion or anything like that. So when it came to Spain, it is this distinct culture that included important scientists, poets, philosophers, architects, and artists. So there was a lot of collaboration happening between the Spanish people and the Islamic people. So whenever it comes to collaborations in general, if you think about things like culture, usually there are more benefits than anything else. And so here is an example of some calligraphy in the Islamic culture. I believe this is a page from the Quran. The Quran is their main manuscript, pretty much like the Bible. And so you can see how much effort and how much thought was put into the stylization of their writing. It's so, it's so organic, it's so mechanical, and it's so beautiful. I really like looking at this type of calligraphy. And so this is text from the Quran made during the 11th century. And when it comes to the Quran, or in calligraphy, you'll often see that for higher learning. It is used to enhance the beauty of the Word of God. And so, just as I mentioned earlier, the Quran is the sacred text of Islam. And so, when it comes to these Islamic cultures in Spain, they had a big influence over the architecture. So when it comes to their architecture, you'll see, for the most part, geometric and floral design motifs that complement calligraphy. So these again are the qualities that really define what Islamic art was all about. A lot of geometric shapes, a lot of floral designs, a lot of calligraphy. So whenever you see all that, especially when it's really dense and it's really complex, that's when you know it's Islamic art. So here's an example of the architecture in Spain during the Islamic rule. So again, we are looking at some really intricate patterns and designs. It's somewhat geometric, but more organic shapes than anything else. And this is called the Court of Lions, the Alhambra Palace. So they have the translucent webs of intricate decoration. Light comes through the small openings, and it's written in this calligraphic script. There is no victor except God. So it's actually a palace itself in a contained city. So there are some links here. Make sure you check them out. This is a architectural panorama of this place, the Alhambra. Basically, that link allows you to look inside, and it's almost like you can have a virtual walkthrough. You can see how these walls and these pillars look in person. You know, just a video, but it's really neat. It's a really neat way to get a virtual tour. And so when it comes to these Islamic cultures, Persia is one of the hot spots in terms of the amount of Islamic art and the amount of contributions they made. Their biggest contributions would be the carpets. So if you have heard of, Persian rugs, they're probably very, very expensive because they would have literally millions of knots. And so the best known Persian art in the West, they are found from here. They are something cool about the Persian arts is they are portable. So you can roll them up and you can bring them around and you can sell them. And it was a means for spreading design ideas. It was a way to create commerce. You say, oh, check out this design. You might like this design, and you can say that there are many. It's a very sought after item to have a Persian rug. So these are very important in the Islamic culture. And so now we're looking at another work of art here. And again, when it comes to the Islamic sense of design, is the collaboration of text and pattern is so intricate and dense. And so what you're looking at here is actually a mihrab. The mihrab is that niche where that usually faces the direction of Mecca. And so there are a lot of really interesting patterns. They're basically layers of patterns. So I'm looking at this pattern use of the reds, and then underneath it are different, at least three shades of blue, and then the gold on top of that. So wow, there's so many really complicated things happening in their overall composition. And check out the calligraphy on the sides and on the top. It's just so majestic, and it's so it's so expressive. I like calligraphy a lot. And so you'll hear this term used a lot when it comes to the Islamic culture, a madrasa. Madrasa is a Muslim or theological school for history, and it is for the interpretation of the Quran and Islam. So it's basically like a convent. it's a school where they can learn about their religion. And so we are looking at a madrasa here. So I'm hoping that by this point of the lecture, you can look at the architecture and right away point out that it is of the Islamic design. We have these minarets, we are seeing the towers, we have the mihrab, we can see the niche perhaps facing the direction of Mecca, and also, of course, the dense use of pattern and design. And so that area that is usually the front porch, they call that an iwan. Iwan is the large covered porch at the center. So there's many floral, geometric, and also epigraphic pattern tiles. The color is integral to the architecture. So they purposely make it, this yellowish color. And one of the reasons why is they want for it to change a little bit as the day goes by. So in the morning, it might appear more white, and then as the sun starts to go down, it becomes a little bit more yellow and then a little bit more orange. So really, really interesting things happening with Islamic works of art. So we're going to talk a little bit about the paintings from Persia. They are these lavish illustrations of manuscripts, most often produced in workshops with anonymous artists. So when it comes to Islamic works of art, it is almost expected that the artist remains anonymous. It's not important for these artists to become known for their these contributions, because it's not really the point of making works of art that deal with their religion. Instead, it's really more as an aid to their contemplation. It's an aid to their prayer and so on. And so here is an example of a painting from Persia. And right away you could probably notice and recall a lot of the Islamic styles, especially with the calligraphy and then the dense use of floral and geometric design. And this is really interesting because it is figurative. There are people involved, which is something that you don't often see in Islamic art, but it is not allowed when it comes to telling stories of Allah or Muhammad. You won't see figurative works there, but you will see figures when it deals with other people. So you can probably guess these are of different people here. And I see what appears to be maybe soldiers of some sort, and also a woman in the very center there. And you can see that there's a story being told. This is called the Sultan Sanjar and the Old Woman. And the story about this, if I can remember, I should have studied. Let's see if I can remember. Sultan Muhammad. Okay, so Sultan Sanjar and the Old Woman. Let's see if I can remember it right now. The Sultan Sanjar is a very important commander of an army. And so something about this piece here, the Old Woman is trying to tell the Sultan Sanjar a story, and that the story is that that the people within his army are treating the common people very badly, and that the old woman is complaining by telling the Sultan that how can you be a good leader when you are treating the people under you so badly? And so that's what the story is behind this work of art here. So this is Sultan Sanjar and the Old Woman from the Kamse 5 Poems of Nizami, made in 1543. And it mentions here it's about this allegory on vanity. So it was almost like she was complaining that they weren't really treating others that well, but they put themselves in a very high position, so they shouldn't always deserve that kind of position. You shouldn't be a very strong and honored leader when you don't really know what's going on. You're not really taking care of your people. So some really interesting things happening with this work of art. And so when it comes to Islamic works of art, you'll always see pattern, and the reason why is the beautiful patterns uplift us in daily life. So it was almost like to see patterns, to be visually present with a pattern there allows for us, or at least in their religion, allows for them to feel closer to Allah. So I believe in this section there's going to be some modern versions of Islamic art. Okay, and so this is actually a video still, and this is actually a still from a video. Yes, it is. It's called Allahu Akbar from the artist Usama al-Shaibi. And I'm not going to click on the link here, so make sure that you check this out on our modules page because it's really cool. It's actually a digital video art. So you'll see these patterns, these triangles and these circles and lines doing all of these different things. And there's also music to it, so it's a very neat experience. So yes, check that out. I'm not going to click it here because I don't think you might not be able to watch it when I click it here. So make sure that you click it on our modules page because I want you to be exposed to these things. And so another example of a more modern or contemporary work of art by an Islamic artist here, Charles Hossein Zenderoji. Large works consisting of Persian syllables repeated hundreds of times. It's a type of meditation exercise. Wow. And so I am looking at a very dense pattern here, this very interesting spiral pattern, and if I can remember something about the Islamic culture and the way the devout would walk around these minarets for certain, they would do revolutions around the minaret during their prayer, and that's what I'm seeing in this work of art here. So it's almost like an allegory of life in itself, that it is very much a very dense and intricate pattern that we're seeing over and over again. And the piece is called VAV plus HWE. Wow, even the title is very contemporary, very contemporary style title there. And so acrylic on canvas. This is a very large painting, 78 by 78. So yes, a lot of geometric patterns and also calligraphy. And so some few facts when it comes to the Islamic culture. We can talk a little bit about the Mughal Empire. So we're going back a little bit. So there was a time in India where there was a small minority that were Muslim. And so since Islam made it all the way to East Asia, it differed from some of the original practices, which was in Mecca. So it was almost like their religion shifted a little bit, and they had a higher level of tolerance. They weren't as strict. Yes, they were actually, yeah, they were not as strict as the original leaders were. So one of their main leaders was named Akbar, and Akbar established a religion to incorporate elements of all religions. So something that I mentioned in the early part of this lecture is this idea that the Islamic religion it goes into shifts or different positions based off of the region. And for Akbar, he is aware of multiple religions in India, so he would incorporate these certain things into their Islamic worship. So it was almost like a hybrid type of religion. Something that Akbar did was he encouraged to depict figures in art, which is almost the opposite of what the original, the grassroots of the Islamic religion established. So now Akbar, he encouraged to depict figures in art, which is a very different thing. It's it's almost like the Pope in Catholicism, where then the Pope now is very I would say he's very I guess he takes more risks. He doesn't mind being more open about a lot of different things. So I'm guessing that Akbar is similar to that. And so here is one of the dwellings of this very famous Islamic leader from the Mughal Empire. Something about the Islamic religion is the depiction of the four riverways, or the four pathways, in reference to the cardinal directions: north, south, east, west. Usually that is a sign of a holy place, or a place of paradise. And this is called the throne room, Divan Ikas. And so if you can imagine, Akbar would sit at the top of this pillar here, and that pillar is a metaphor for the intersection of religious systems. So because he's sitting here, it is being held up from the bottom. Then we have the four cardinal directions. It was a metaphor that he was trying to, or that he established many of the religions to, in a way, function as one. So another famous ruler from the Mughal Empire is Shah Jahan. Maybe some of you have heard of his name before. If you have, that's a good thing, because we studied him already from a previous chapter. So he is actually the one that built the Taj Mahal. So the Taj Mahal was built for his favorite wife that actually died during childbirth. And so there is a central Iwan fronted with a pointed arch. There is beauty from expensive materials and poetic arrangements of mass. There's the paradise motif in the inscription surrounding the doorway arch. So the paradise motif is also a big part of the Taj Mahal, the riverways and the four cardinal directions. So Shah Jahan, also a very revered ruler from the Mughal Empire. So you can say that the Mughal Empire was a very important part of Islamic religion. So here is the front way, the Iwan of the Taj Mahal. So you can actually see how large this building actually is. You can see how tall the people are, and compared to how tall they are in scale. And so again, a few more different external URLs. Make sure you check those out.